Namaskar. Welcome to the 11th episode of Satya Samvad. In Bharat, we are all familiar with the stories of the Ramayana and Mahabharat. We have read the verses or about the Ved, the Rig Ved, Samved, Atharva Ved, and Yajur Ved. One natural question that comes to mind when it comes to these celebrated formulations is whether the geographical aspects of these texts are based on actual places. Another natural question pertains to historicity, whether our itihas are premised on historical events. The Congress Party, for instance, does not seem to believe in the historical existence of Sri Ram. In 2007, the Union government, led by Dr. Manmohan Singh, filed an affidavit in the very highest court of the country, the Supreme Court, saying that the Valmiki Ramayana and Ramcharitmanas admittedly form an important part of ancient Indian literature, but these cannot be said to be historical records to incontrovertibly prove the existence of the characters and occurrences of events depicted therein. Even till this day, the party seems to have a problem with celebrating Sri Ram's legacy, having avoided the Sri Ram Janmabhoomi Tirth Pran Pratishtha. In this episode, we will dive into the rich tapestry of geography and history embedded in the Ved and India's monumental epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharat, from a perspective antithetical to that of the cynics. In this episode, we'll be looking at a rigorous geochronological study to see how these ancient narratives and stories do more than tell a certain anecdote. They map the very foundations of civilization itself. And for this and more, we have with us today, Shri Jijith Nadumuri Ravi. We welcome you today, Jijith.
Yeah, thank you.
So Jijith is a former ISRO space scientist and contributor to Chandrayaan-1 mission. He now delves with the geographical and chronological aspects of the Ved, Ramayana and Mahabharat. He founded Ancient Voice, a comprehensive wiki that integrates the texts of the great Indian epics and Ved with interactive maps and digital tools. Leveraging his expertise in digital technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality, Jijith launched the platform called Dharma Digital for Dharmic revival through AI-driven interactive digital holograms of Devtas. He has recently written 3 fascinating books on the rivers of Rigved, the geography of Ramayana, and the geography of Mahabharat. We are happy to have you with us today, Jijith. So to begin with, your journey has been fascinating, with you beginning as a scientist in ISRO, when you worked on the Chandrayaan-1 and GSLV projects. How did you transition to this equally riveting realm of geochronology and studying the geography of Dharma and Bharat, with your initial foray into uploading your research, if I'm not mistaken, onto Wikipedia between 2004 and 2009, when you wrote around 150 articles on the various Janapadas mentioned in Valmiki Ramayana and Mahabharat?
Yes. So if I look at the long journey, I have started the research even before 2000, but the public domain presence of my research start from 2004, when I have published some of my articles related to the Janapadas that is mentioned in the Mahabharata and Ramayana, completely with the Bharatavarsha maps of kingdoms and cities in the Bharatavarsha. And that time, there was no particular platform or medium where I can upload it, and I found Wikipedia as an emerging platform where there is a possibility of bringing this new information. And so I have started contributing to Wikipedia in the form of these articles, and it turns out to be around 150 articles between 2004 to 2009 period, which I created. And this is something very rare, most of these articles are still intact, and people have maintained it because of the intrinsic value and the originality of the information inside that. But some of them are like vandalized, etc. But around 95% of that original articles are still continuing, and that is a matter of pride for me.
Absolutely. You raised a very important point, which is that of the vandalism, so to say. And there has been discussion, especially on the Dharmic side. And when it comes to narrative building, there is this concept of virtual narrative immersion, which is the way in which netizens are absorbed into and aligned with a narrative. For the longest time, the Dharmic perspective on various topics were either negligible or absent. The problem in virtual knowledge repositories is the concerted intrusion by various anti-Hindu voices, for instance, leading to a skewed projection against the true picture of Dharma and Bharat. So did you face the same with the contributions on Wikipedia? And what did you do about the same?
Yes. So then 2004, when Wikipedia started, it was a great promise. And it was mentioned as an encyclopedia created by everybody with the contribution from 360 degree across the world. So that promise was fulfilled like in 2004, 2005, maybe up to 2008, everything was in a very good shape. But then suddenly I could see hijacking of the pages, articles which are focused on India. For example, like wherever we mentioned about something which is contrary to the Aryan invasion theory, like out of India theory, if there is an article about Śikhaṇḍī or Dr. Conrad else, everything is vandalized and completely turned it upside down. And similar kind of vandalization, maybe not to the extent of distorting the pages on out of India theory, but otherwise, like sometimes they will put random words into the very well researched and very hard, like with a lot of effort, and you put in some information about some Janapada, like Kuru Janapada or Panjala Janapada, or even very rare Nishadha, etc. They will start putting some vandalization comments, and then it will become a big pain, because you have around 150 articles, and then somewhere around somebody will do something every day. And that was a very difficult situation. Then I have because I have a information technology background as well, apart from being a scientist. So I looked at methodology of creating my own Wikipedia, and then finally created like a Wikidot, which is like, instead of creating Wikipedia articles, it allows you to actually create your own wiki itself, something similar to Wikipedia. So that is a little more one level down in the value chain. I mean, or one level up in the value chain and one level down in the technology. So I took that opportunity, and then I created the Wikidot, where you can actually create your own site, your own Wikipedia. So then I created a site. It was like focusing on the Mahabharata wiki, where around 15,000 different wiki pages with around 8,000 noun pages, and remaining pages, the actual narrative of the Mahabharata in Adhyayas and Paravas. All these things are interconnected by using a neuro-linguistic programming, and around millions of interconnections, and also detected around 8,000 nouns from the Mahabharata pertaining to kings and sages, names of kings and sages, Janapadas, cities, towns, villages. So that became an encyclopedia of Mahabharata as a first thing in the ancient voice. That site name is Ancient Voice. So Mahabharata Wiki was the main thing inside that. And I got a lot of appreciation from different users, including PhD scholars, the universities, etc. Then I expanded with the Ramayana Wiki, and then the Vishnu Purana Wiki, then wikis for Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda, and different two versions of Yajur Veda, Krishna and Shukla Yajur Veda, everything. And of course, I have extended that my support by like giving a kind of sister website like Takshashila, where the Greek epics Iliad and Odyssey also similarly doing noun analysis and wikification. And the Zoroastrian text, that is Venkatad, Visparad, Yasna, Zirosa, Yast, which is equivalent to the Bharatiya Vedic Vedas, like Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda, like that. The Zoroastrians, they are basically our enemies. I mean, ideological enemies at that time, like they differed from the Vedic civilization and separated out and become Zoroastrian. But then to understand the continuity between the Bharatiya tradition and the Zoroastrian tradition and the Greek tradition, which I consider as Daitya and Danava tradition, because the Zoroastrian, in their text themselves, they mention they are like coming from the Daitya river, which I have identified as the Vidasta, that is Jalam or Chenab river in the western, northwestern India. So they themselves give that understanding that they come from the Daitya river. And in the Greek, many of the heroes in the Greek epics, like Agamemnon or Achilles, they claim themselves to be descendants of the Danan, Danan tribe. So Danan is very much equivalent to the Danava tribe. So each of these two civilizations, the very neighborhood, the Zoroastrians, so they can map to as a Daityas, and the Greek civilization can be mapped as Danavas. So both of them collectively as Asura. So because I understand there is a connection, so I have created the wikis for those. And of course, then Upanishads and then two Itihasas or epics of Tamil, Silapatikaram and the Manimekhalai. So this is the entire span of the wikis that I have created into three sister sites, Ancient Voice, Takshashila, and the Nalanda website. And in that Ancient Voice become larger with the 25,300 plus pages as of today.
Right. That's amazing. I think this whole idea of moving away from a platform which is inherently not quite working along the lines of projecting what needs to be projected is something that we are seeing more widely as of today when it comes to even social media, for instance, with various kinds of initiatives like Ku for that matter, and also as you have put out the wiki kind of based aspects as well, which are standalone, independent initiatives as such. So that's a commendable and amazing kind of piece of work. Now, moving from virtual narrative immersion to immersive technology, I started with the introduction on Dharma Digital, which is your platform where you have used virtual reality and augmented reality to promote Sanatana Dharma. And this is something which is rather important in today's virtual age when we see the various ways in which people are being made to understand or being introduced to various concepts and traditions of thought. So can you tell us a little about the same?
Yes. So as I because in 2004 I faced the one observation that Iliad Odyssey, there is a lot of things talked about, but there is nothing about Mahabharata in online. So that is what I fulfilled using the Wikipedia article, and then I found Wikipedia not very good because of the vandalism in the ancient voice. So similarly, around 2016, because I had started developing expertise as part of my continuous engagement with IT, the advancements in the technology, that is what you call extended reality, which has got three flavors: the virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality kind of flavors. So then I immediately understand the potential of this particular technology, especially the augmented reality technology, which is like you put some head-mounted devices on your head, or you can use your own mobile phone and then create virtual digitally created entities to be present in the real world. Right. So this immediately strike me. It is something like like in our Puranas we say that the Vishnu or Shiva just appear in front of you and give you blessing. So then there is a possibility using technology to actually simulate that kind of a scenario. So I have created the Devatas, the holographic representation of the Devatas. That is Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara, then Lakshmi, Parvati, and Saraswati, whatever exactly in the goddess representation that we have currently, and all the Itihasic heroes like Pandavas, and then Panchali, and then Rama, Balarama, and Sri Krishna, and then not only also in the Ramayana, the four brothers Rama, Bharata, Lakshmana, Shatrugna, and Sita, Hanuman, all these different people. I mean, different personalities in the both Itihasas, and then in the Puranic Dashavataras, and then in the Rigvedic the Dwadash is in the Rigveda there are only 7 Adityas, so 7 Adityas plus Martanda, and then in the Puranas it expanded to Dwadasha Aditya, 12 Adityas representing each month. So that Dwadasha Adityas, then the Rudras, then Vasus. So in their Aitihasic and Puranic personalities are around 100 holograms, digital holograms. And all of the holograms have a capability of speaking, conversing with you based on using of this artificial intelligence, right. And as well as walking and performing any activities on the real world, like they can walk in the real world. But of course, now it is not an naked eye kind of an experience, but you can look through a mobile phone or kind of a little more costly and powerful head-mounted devices, etc. You can have this experience. And Dharma Digital platform is actually meant for popularizing it and then taking it to the entire world so that it can create a kind of a dharmic revival or for the new generation. Because I also see the shift from the new generation from the reading towards watching videos to looking at this virtual reality experience, etc. So this will be catering to the new generation, and mostly the students and children, people of age of 25 plus, they are very much interested in this, of course, but also there is an interest coming into the middle age or old age generation. Right. So that is where after 2016 to even like until I started writing books, I was very active in creating the holograms and creating experience around it for festivals, etc. So for us, Onam celebration, then I will have the Mahabali walking around in the room and then sitting in your sofa, or Vamanan actually blessing you. All these things, so right, pertaining to different festivals. Absolutely. For Shabarimala, like that.
Absolutely.
Ayodhya, like that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it so much more relatable, when it comes to, for instance, as you mentioned, Mahabali, in a context or in a situation which is relatable to any individual as such. I remember that, even the Ramakrishna Mission, I think recently has looked at the journey of Swami Vivekananda, for instance, in the Delhi ashram, where his passage near off the coast of Kanyakumari, has been kind of put forth in a beautiful kind of, experience of sorts, which makes it very, very much more relatable, essentially. So it is amazing that you have done that and you have looked at, different devatas you mentioned. I'm just curious, are there also situations from the stories that, the devatas have been part of, enacted or unfolding as part of this experience?
Yeah, yes. So I was, of course, I was doing it in a kind of a family environment of my friends, etc. But there was one instance where Assist World Record approached me, and then I created a public broadcast of Bhagavad Gita hologram where Krishna is conversing with Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita like episodes of Mahabharata. So many people don't know about it's a part of Mahabharata. So that I have rendered, and that was I got a Assist World Record for Bhagavad Gita, a holographic representation, because there were videos earlier, there were many other expressions, but this is first time it is a digital hologram of the augmented reality based digital hologram experience. So the first world record. And then I was part of the Toy-a-thon kind of an initiative from the Ministry of Education and Government of India. So I have showcased the Dharma Digital holograms and the talking Ganesha. We can ask a question like, who are you, who is your father and mother? And the Ganesh will answer, my father is Shiva and my mother is Parvati. So like that, even for conversation with Sri Ganesha. And then I created one Sri Krishna who is in a jhula, like in a swing. And you can touch, and of course it's a mobile application. So you can touch on the jhula and then you can make Sri Krishna oscillate in the jhula. So this was a lot of people got attracted to it, and of course I got the certificate and award as a winner of the Toy-a-thon. But other than that, I could create a lot of impression on large number of children and their parents. And lastly, I was also part of the national technology event where Prime Minister Narendra Modi also was present, and then I was able to showcase these holograms, where I have shown talking Sita and then Sri Rama and Hanuman jumping across the books. All this I have demonstrated, and a lot of people come and saw it is in the booth. Of course, I could not personally meet the Prime Minister, but he was the person who inaugurated it, and we could directly face to face was part of his speech, etc. Maybe some videos might have also got the attention of the Prime Minister. I don't know, but this is also a very interesting experience I was having.
Absolutely. Amazing again. And I think much deserved all the recognition that you've got. And I hope that, the deployment of technology in this manner that you've done, goes across the world as much as we can, because it's so very important to, make the dharmic values that we all would like to stand for much more relatable and much more kind of in the immediate vicinity with the deployment of technology, so to say. Now, you mentioned about Srimad Bhagavad Gita, and you mentioned about Sri Krishna's kind of dialogue with Arjuna. Now, the Mahabharata is a foundational itihas of Bharatvarsh, of course, and there have been multiple initiatives to both kind of determine as well as to negate its historicity. And what is the central kind of crux or the central kind of point always is the specific dating of the Kurukshetra War. So when did the story of the Mahabharata unfold as per your work that you have done, and you've written about this extensively, and how do you say so, scientifically speaking?
Right. Yeah, that's a very important question. And I have been telling to all the enthusiasts who want to date the Mahabharata, Kurukshetra War, etc., and who assert that it is a historical event. Because the historicity is destroyed mainly because they are dating it in a millennium. Which is very old, or maybe in the 3rd millennium BC or in the 6th millennium BC, then it becomes non-historical. It becomes a pure fiction. But if you date the Kurukshetra War like later to 2000 BC, for example, you have already the Iron Age started in India. A very special case in 2000 BC, even though it started in Europe in 1200 BC. So we were a little advanced in Iron Age in 2000 BC that we have got Iron Age. So entire narrative of Mahabharata where they talk about iron arrows, narachas, and then a lot of technological elements which actively use iron. That is like become reality. So you don't have to say that these are all imagined or somebody later added up into the Mahabharata, because contemporary to Pandavas you have iron. And similarly, of course, if you put it in 2000 BC, so then chariot technology evolution. So many people complain archaeological survey of India has not excavated much. So no, it's not like that, because the world's only chariot, the true bona fide chariot driven by horses, is actually Sinoli chariot. But after the discovery, there is a lot of politics, people in because they were desperate for getting an Aryan invasion theory-based evidence. And there is no real chariot anywhere in wherever the Aryan invasion theorists place the Aryans before they coming into India. None of the places they got any chariot. Whatever they got is some carts, etc. But then suddenly Dr. Sanjay Manjul excavated a Sinali chariot which is dated to around 2000 BC. These people completely, like, their mental balance have lost, and then they started trying to downplay it, etc. But many of the researchers, for example, even Alexander Samanengo and others, who is also an expert in this area in Westerners, they have clearly shown that this is the only chariot, only horse-driven chariot with proper features of a horse-driven chariot, that is Hindu chariot, excavated in 2000 BC. So we have a very good evidence in the Indian soil that in Sinoli is a very, like if you look at it from Hastinapura, it is very few kilometers. From Indraprastha, it is very few kilometers. So we have a very strong evidence to place Kurukshetra War later to 2000 BC. And in that itself, because a lot of people go with astronomy, so you have an astronomer, Dr. Ashok Bhatnagar, who use the same methodology of astronomy, like whatever other researchers who date in 5561 BC or 3000 to 3200 BC. The same data set in the Mahabharata regarding the position of the planets and the nakshatras and the eclipses. He used the same data set, and he came to the conclusion that it is in 1793 BC. So this already astronomy also supporting the dates which are lower than 2000 BC. And Dr. Sanjay Manjul, who excavated the Sinali chariot, gives a date of 1700 to 1800 BC range, because archaeology is good at giving ranges, astronomy is good at giving pinpoint dates. So Sanjay Manjul's archaeology-based date using copper mold and OCP, that is or pottery culture, which is a contemporary culture to the late Rigvedic period, and contemporary to this late Harappan period. So late Harappan was somewhat into the west of Yamuna and slightly incursions into the eastern part of the Yamuna in the western Uttar Pradesh, whereas OCP was contemporary to the late Harappan and extending beyond the almost all of the Uttar Pradesh, that the OCP related artifacts we get, like at least the western half of Uttar Pradesh, it is there. So OCP is actually spanning the entire area where the major cities of Mahabharata is present, like Kautilya, Hichandra, Indraprastha and Hastinapura, and the Virat Nagari, where the Pandavas lived in the incognito. The Eka Chakra and all these places, OCP is already covered, and it is readily available in 2000 BC. So you have a real archaeological situation where you can say that between 1700 BC to 1800 BC, the Kurukshetra War occurred. And that is what Dr. Sanjay Munjal also mentioned based on archaeology. So you are first time in the history of the entire Kurukshetra War study. You got one astronomy date, that is 1793 by Ashok Bhatnagar, and an archaeology range from Dr. Sanjay Munjal, joining, say, combining together. Because 1793 BC is between 1700 BC and 1800 BC. So this I call as Dyaus Dhara consensus. Dyaus means sky, which is the astronomy. Dhara means earth, that is archaeology. So we have a Dyaus Dhara consensus, or the first time consensus between astronomy and archaeology in 1793 BC, date of the Kurukshetra War.
Right. And in terms of the dating of the war itself, there is a certain kind of school of thought that places it at around 3100 post that, essentially BCE. So obviously a natural curiosity would be regarding what is it that kind of makes that divergence happen between that school of thought and what you have and what you just mentioned. Where exactly did they probably not get it all the way right? And how does it come towards more closer to 2000 BC?
Yes. So this dating of, I put it as a 3000 to 3200 BC, 200 years, where you have so many datings at like 3067 BC from Dr. Achar, then okay, a little more earlier, then 3136 BC by Jayasri, and 3138 BC by Kota Venkatachalam. These are like just either 2 years earlier and 2 years later than the traditional date of 3138 BC. So
Right.
Kota's date is 3139. So they are very close to traditional date. And you have 3067 by Dr. Achar, and Vedaviraya have 3137. So it's spanning into 200 years between 3000 BC to 3200 BC.
Right.
So the reason why these dates are coming is because the entire astronomy, the archaeoastronomy is based on the planetary positions. So like the 5 visible planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter and Saturn, then Sun and Moon. So total 7 visible celestial bodies, their position in various, against the backdrop of various nakshatras, and the eclipses that is happening very close to the Kurukshetra War. And they also use some astronomy observation during the Balarama pilgrimage, the Pushya Sravana Nakshatra that is there. Also use the nakshatra that was mentioned during the Krishna's peace mission, and Bhishma Moksha, that is the Bhishma's the position of the winter solstice very close to the Bhishma's demise, which is like the Uttarayana start, etc. So this is the same set used by all the researchers who dated from 5561 BC to 3000 to 3200 BC and later to 2000 BC also. And the dating was even the youngest dating is like Iyengar, Professor Varana Iyengar. So that is 1478 BC. So this is the reason is because there is a cyclicity in the astronomical phenomena. So some of the kind of a very close kind of a conjunction can take place in between 2000 to 2000 to 1500 BC, 3000 to 3200 BC, even 5561 BC also some kind of a similar looking conjunctions will occur. That is one of the main reasons for diversity in the dates. So that is only the reason why you use multidisciplinary approach, saying that IRD is later to 2000 BC. So that filtering out whichever is improbable and coming with the dates which are agreeing for astronomy as well as for other disciplines like the technology evolution of chariots, material science evolution like iron technology, bronze alloy, bronze technology. And even other hydrology, for example, the drying up of Saraswati, the mid-course of Saraswati drying up around 1900 BC, which again reflected exactly like that in the Balarama's pilgrimage. Whereas in the Rig Veda, the Saraswati is mentioned as a mighty river flowing or overflowing with water, etc. Whereas in the Mahabharata, it is a partially dried up river. So everything aligns. Then you have to look at the bathymetry around the Ran of Kutch region where Saraswati drains. So if you look at all these things, then the archaeoastronomy dates will give you ranges from sixth millennium to second millennium BC, out of which we have to filter it using the other disciplines. So that is the approach I have used.
Absolutely, and I think that's again very fascinating and an important point to highlight, that it's a, as you rightly said, it's a multidisciplinary, multivariate, multidimensional kind of exploration where many different points of interest and elements have to converge together to kind of ascertain the date that is required essentially here. Now, when you talk about the Mahabharata, you have also kind of delved deeply in the Rig Veda. And let us talk about your first book, The Rivers of Rigveda. And you have posited some very interesting points there as well. So just to highlight a few, the identification of the celebrated river Saraswati, which has been ongoing, a point of discussion in recent years quite significantly as that. And the identification of the Rigvedic Saryu River now, which you say is different and distinct from the Aitihasic Saryu, which you regard as the Ghagra, the tributary of the river Ganga. And if it comes to the anecdotes themselves, you have identified, for instance, Sri Ram to be a contemporary of Maharaja Shantanu from the Mahabharat lore, the father of Bhishma, as contemporary kings of the Rig Veda 10th Mandal. And then you also speak about the chronology of famous seers such as Maharshi Vishwamitra and Maharshi Vasishtha and their descendants. So all of this is extremely fascinating, and many of these are, I'm sure, very novel kind of points of view when it comes to these the Rig Veda itself. So can you tell us a little about this?
Yeah, yes. So the Rig Veda is the first book I have published, and there is a reason, because I started writing a book on Mahabharata, where I have spent the largest amount of my research. But then I understand, without properly understanding Rig Veda, and also the Ramayana, which precedes the Mahabharata, there is no possibility of writing a meaningful book on the Mahabharata. So that is why I started the Rig Veda. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the River Saraswati location, despite all the controversy regarding the River Saraswati, it's a very easy identification. Because in the Nadi Sukta, there is a very clear sequence in which the rivers are mentioned, like Imame, Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, Sududri, Parishni, Asikni, the Vidasta, Arjakiya, like that. So that entire sequence where the Yamuna is the river mentioned before Saraswati, and Sududri, that is Satluj, is mentioned as the river after Saraswati. So the enumeration is happening from east to west, from Ganga onwards to western rivers up to Sindhu, and then Sindhu, river Sindhu's tributaries in the western side. So east-west enumeration, in which Saraswati is mentioned after Yamuna and before Satluj, Sududri Satluj. So that very clearly we know where is Yamuna, that is the Haryana UP border, and Satluj is in the Punjab. So between Punjab and UP, that is in Haryana. Saraswati is flowing in Haryana, is automatically coming from the Nadi Sukta. It is very simple, but unnecessarily using Wikipedia and other controlled, Western controlled medium, they are still propagating that Saraswati might be somewhere in Afghanistan, etc. But it is very simple. Then my complex problem, this Saraswati identification was not a complex problem. It was very simple. Nadi Sukta gives it. But the complex solutions or discoveries in the Rig Veda, the book on the rivers of Rig Veda, which is based on the Nadis, that is around 32 rivers in the Rig Veda, out of which 21 rivers automatically Nadi Sukta is providing. So that is the highly dense, geographically dense Sukta by Sindhu Kshitriya Metha. That is the 10th Mandala Sukta, the 10th Mandala 75th Sukta, Nadi Sukta, gives you 21 rivers. But then the remaining rivers are spread across all over the 1028 Suktas in the Rig Veda. So out of which one river is Sarayu River. So here actually a little more attention is given, because this river is not to be confused with the Aitihasic Sarayu. So I give a terminology, the Rigvedic Sarayu and Aitihasic Sarayu. Aitihasic Sarayu, there is no doubt, it is the Ghagra River, that is the river flowing to Ayodhya in Uttar Pradesh. But the Rigvedic Sarayu is a different river, which is not mentioned in the Itihasa-Purana, because the focus during the Itihasa-Puranas was in the Ganga region. But the Rigvedic, there is a little focus on the Sindhu side, etc. Where between Saraswati and Sindhu, a lot of focus is there. So this river captured attention of the Rigvedic people, and I identified with the Haro River. It's another tributary of Sindhu. So you have a mirror image kind of a situation. Saraswati is in the middle, and to its west is Ganga. Saraswati is in the middle. To its east is Ganga. To its west is Sindhu River. And two tributaries of Sindhu is named as Sarayu and Gomati. So the Sindhu tributary Sarayu is the Haro River. Sindhu tributary Gomati is the Komal River. Both of them in Pakistan. And exact mirror reflection of that in the two tributaries of Ganga, which is one is Ghagra and another one is Gomati River. So if you look at the Sarayu or the Ghagra in Uttar Pradesh is a northern tributary. Gomati is a southern tributary, and both of them flowing into Ganga. And if you look at in the western side, Sarayu, the Haro River, is flowing as a northern river, then flowing into the some Sindhu, and the Gomati is a little bit southwards, and again flowing into Sindhu. So this mirror reflection also helped me to identify some very hidden kind of migrations. That is like bi-directional migration from Saraswati to eastwards and westwards. And this is actually is a paradigm that it is newly introduced over and above the 3 books of Śikhaṇḍī Talagiri. Because Śikhaṇḍī has discovered the eastward migration, which lead from the northwest India towards Afghanistan and then Europe and then Central Asia and then Europe, like that. That I have fully endorsed that eastern migration. So there is no change into that. But only there is a local migration, which is starting from Saraswati to both sides of the river Saraswati. So because there are people migrated from to both east and west from Saraswati, these people named it like the eastern rivers are named as Sarayu and Gomati and tributaries of Ganga, and western, the people who migrated from Saraswati to Sindhu side, they named the names as Sarayu and Gomati. So that is how the mirror image kind of situation came. And these people who migrated also, I have identified as Ikshwakus, the two branches of Ikshwaku. So one is the western branch, which has went to the west, and the eastern branch, which is went to the east. And in the eastern branch started from the descendant of Sagara, like Amshumat, grandson of Sagara. He has established in Yamuna and renamed Yamuna as Amshumati. And then the Bhagirath moves to further eastwards and renames Ganga as Bhagirathi. And then Bhagirath's descendants are like Aja, Dasharatha, and Rama. They established in the Sarayu river of the eastern side, and as a city of Ayodhya is established in that way. But earlier to the eastern migration, because the Saraswati was drying up from southern point to northwards. So some dynasties of Ikshwakus were living in the southern, far southern side of Saraswati. So initial dry up happened there, and so because of that, they migrated earlier than the eastern Ikshwakus. So they were actually going to this Sindhu side and naming it the tributaries of Sindhu as Gomati and Sarayu. So some of the kings are like who lived in this Sarayu river is Purukutsa and Prasadasi mentioned in the Rigveda as a very great allies of the ancestor of the Pandavas, like Samvarana, who is mentioned again in the Rigveda as a Puru of scornful speech, and he had a conflict with Sudas. Sudas is an ancestor of Panchalas. So you have the ancestor of Pandavas as Samvarana, who is mentioned as Puru of scornful speech, conflicting with the ancestor of Panchala mentioned as Sudas. There was a conflict, and this conflict is both in the Rigveda as Dasharajana battle, and the same conflict is mentioned in the Mahabharata Adi Parva as a conflict between Samvarana and the Panchalas, because of which Samvarana got defeated and he fled to the Sindhu river. So that again, same picture we can see in the Rigveda. Like that.
Absolutely. And I think also the point on the last point that I mentioned, which is very fascinating, because again, you have the Itihasa, right, which we have the two Itihas, the primary Itihas that we talk about, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and we think about the spacing out of it, with a significant number of years in between. Now you have posited that, that Sri Ram and, Maharaj Shantanu, who was the father of Bhishma, were contemporaries, right? So which makes it much more closer than we initially thought about. So can you tell us a little about that?
So that inference, the big insight I got from the Rig Veda itself, because in the Rig Veda, there is in the 10th mandala, both Sri Rama as well as Shantanu are mentioned as contemporary kings, which means that there in the Rig Vedic mention, sometimes they mention about past kings who have lived in an ancient period. So some kings are mentioned as contemporary. So in the language that is used in the Rig Veda, that is like the Sri Rama was living in that same moment, that is in the 10th mandala composition period. He was giving some dana to some for the composer, the Tanva Partha, that where the Sri Rama is mentioned. And Shantanu also mentioned as a contemporary king, because Devapi, the Devapi and Shantanu both are mentioned. So Devapi is actually praying for rains in the kingdom of Shantanu. That is also mentioned in the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda. So both Shantanu of the Kuru dynasty and Rama of Ikshvaku dynasty, both were mentioned as contemporary kings of the 10th mandala. So this gives me an insight that both Rama and Shantanu are contemporary kings. So one is ruling in Hastinapura, another is ruling in Ayodhya. Then I looked at, to corroborate, I looked further in the Ramayana and Mahabharata, and I'm totally surprised, because there are so many people who are actually contemporary to both Rama and they lived in Pandavara also, like Parashurama, then Hanuman, and there is a very rare people don't know, but Markandeya also was aware of Sri Rama. He saw Sri Rama in the Rishyamukha mountains as a young boy, and later on he was able to converse with Yudhishthira during the Vanavasa, and again he was talking about Rama to Yudhishthira, because Yudhishthira's wife Panchali got abducted by Jayadratha, and Yudhishthira was asking, is there anybody who is hapless like Panchali or me? Then he talked about Sri Rama, that I met him in the Rishyamukha mountains, and his wife was abducted by Ravana. All this, so the entire Ramayana is narrated in the Mahabharata. Right. So now how to test this hypothesis? So I looked at the lineage tree. So one thing is that Parashurama, who is contemporary to Sri Rama, is preceptor for Shantanu's son Bhishma. So naturally, like both of these Rama and Shantanu are contemporary. Shantanu's son Bhishma is taught by Parashurama, because Parashurama, Sri Rama, and Shantanu are contemporaries. So Parashurama can teach Shantanu's son Bhishma, and of course after that he is taught Drona, and in Mahabharata it is also mentioned he taught Karna also. And there is a very rare references in the Mahabharata Vanaparva where Parashurama is talking to Yudhishthira. So there is, or interacting with Yudhishthira. So there is a very continuity of the Parashurama is a figure who is there both in the Ramayana and Pandavara. Hanuman similarly is very well known. Hanuman was the biggest supporter of Sri Rama, and then he met Bhima during that Śikhaṇḍī episode. So that is also very clear. And then Markandeya I already mentioned. Now it doesn't stop with three people. There are Mainda and Vibhida, who are actually the generals of Sugriva. They are mentioned as fighting with Balarama later in the Harivamsha. And Krishna is mentioned as marrying the descendant or daughter of Jambavat. So again, so many. Then in the Dakshina, that is the Digvijaya of Sahadeva. Sahadeva is mentioned as giving a messenger to Vibhishana ruling in Laṅkā, and he gives that message from Bharuch, that is Bhagakuksha in the near this Narmadā. So there is again Vibhishana is contemporary to both the Rama and Pandavira, and Pandavas lived for 5 years during their Vanavasa in the Yaksha territory of Vaisravana. So many of the individuals in the life of Sri Rama is also there in the life of the Pandavas. Right. This again corroborating my understanding that both Rama and Shantanu are contemporary to the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda, and they are lived at the same time. Again, I looked at the Vasishtha third corroboration, third kind of confirmation, the Vasishtha lineage. So you can understand that the Vasishtha, who was the priest of Rama, is the same Vasishtha who actually is the great grandfather of Vyasa. Because the Vasishtha, there's a 10th mandala Vasishtha who lived contemporary to Sri Rama, and that same 10th mandala Vasishtha I consider as Sri Rama's priest. And this priest Vasishtha's son is Parashara, and then Parashara will be automatically the contemporary to Sri Rama and Shantanu. because Vasishtha is in the grandfather generation of Sri Rama. So he was not only the preceptor of Rama, but also of Dasharatha. So typically a guru will be one generation upward. So if he is a guru of Dasharatha, then Vasishtha is a grandfather generation, like generation of Rama's grandfather Aja. That means Vasishtha's son Parashara and Vasishtha's son Shakti will be contemporary to Dasharatha, and Shakti's son Parashara will be contemporary to Sri Rama. So Sri Rama, Parashara, and Shantanu all contemporaries. And Parashara and Shantanu both produced children in same Satyavati, with a Matsya woman Satyavati. So Parashara son is Vyasa, and Shantanu sons are Vichitravirya and Chitraṅģādā and Vichitravirya.
Right.
So again, through the lineage of Vyasa, you get the contemporariness of Rama and Shantanu. And the generations of people are adding up, very well conformed and aligned. So there are three different ways you get the same result, that Rama and Shantanu are contemporaries.
Right. There's a fascinating point you mentioned about. So when you mentioned about Parashuram and you mentioned about Vishwamitra and Vasishtha as well, you have spoken about how the lineages often mean that these terms specifically have often been used as titles as well, right? They have been used by, different individuals at different points in time, for instance. So one natural question, of course, is that the mention of Parashuram, for instance, or Vasishtha, for instance, in two texts, does that really mean the same person, or is it meaning two different individuals or holding the title of that particular sage, for instance? And the second question that comes to mind is that of the Chiranjeevis, right? We talk about, Maharshi Parshuram as a Chiranjeevi. We talk about Shri Hanuman as a Chiranjeevi as well, and various others, so to say. You mentioned that that's a later interpolation between in the texts as such, in the traditions of the Indian knowledge systems. So can you please tell us a little about that?
Yes. So this question of the individuality of the names and Vasishtha and Agastya, so many ascetic lineage, I have already clarified in my first rivers of Rigveda, because the Vasishtha lineage has a very speciality that all the composers in the Vasishtha lineage attribute their composition to Vasishtha. So their personal names are not known. So this is a tradition. They have a tradition of attributing. So even Talagiri also agrees that same thing in his books, that Vasishtha lineage have this kind of quality. So there is a 7th Mandala Vasishtha and 7th Mandala Vishwamitra, who were actually advisor to Sudas. So older advisor was Vishwamitra and later advisor was Vasishtha. And during the Vishwamitra's period, there was a crossing of chariots across Satluj Bias River, etc., which is a bull-driven chariot. That is contemporary. That was a kind of a technology of that early Rigvedic period. And then similarly, so I have looked at the composer names in the Rigveda to understand the uniqueness of each Vasishtha and Vishwamitra. So, for example, if a Vishwamitra or Vasishtha are mentioned as composers to the 7th Mandala, they are early Rigvedic Vishwamitra or early Rigvedic Vasishtha. And similarly, there are rishis by the same name, like they use the name Vishwamitra and then compose a sutta in the 10th Mandala. So they are basically 10th Mandala individuals. So that way, I was able to give individuality to people otherwise who are using the same name. So similarly, I have discovered every sage mentioned in the Rama's life. I looked at the Rigveda, I could identify there is a sage by that name in 10th Mandala. For example, Gautama. Gautama is actually in the Ramayana, it is Gautama is mentioned. There is a sage named Gautama composing 10th Mandala. Vishwamitra, who have taken Rama in the early ages, there is a Vishwamitra in 10th Mandala. Vasishtha as a priest in the Dasharatha and Rama, again there is a Vasishtha in 10th Mandala as a composer. Even Atri is there, like he visited Atri Asrama, there is an Atri in 10th Mandala. So and Rama, see Parashurama's case, the terminology is Rama Jamadagnya. So there is a Rama Jamadagnya who is a composer in the 10th Mandala. So that Rama Jamadagnya is what I identified as the unique Parashurama. So there may be, for example, later on the Parashurama similar to this Vasishtha have introduced a kind of, because this name become very famous. So maybe after Rama era and the Pandava era, there were many Parashuramas, but the Parashurama of both the Pandava era and Rama era is the same person, which is the 10th Mandala composer Parashurama. So that identity is well identified, because there you have a data in Rig Veda, then you don't have to like postulate these abstract names, because there is a clear data in the Rig Veda of a 10th mandala Parashurama composer. He is known as Rama Jamadagni, the Rama, the son of Jamadagni. So that Parashurama is a contemporary to Sri Rama. Same Parashurama is teaching the Bhishma, Drona, and others. But of course, later, for example, even in Shabarimala, there is a mention about the Parashurama coming and consecrating the Ayyappa, etc. So that is very late. So that means there is after the very famous Parashurama or Rama Jamadagnya of 10th mandala, there was a tradition. Even in my book Mahabharata, I mentioned that Vyasa is a similar kind of a figure. So after this Satyavati and Parashara's son Vyasa is born, his own descendants continuously using that name Vyasa. That is why the Vyasa in the Mahabharata is already present in the Shantanu's generation, and still he is present in the Janamejaya generation.
Right.
That is because just like the Vasishtha in the Rig Veda, every generation they use the name Vyasa and attribute everything to Vyasa. That is the reason why it has happened. So yeah, even in 10th mandala there was an Agastya, who is a very famous Agastya who has guided Rama to the southern direction, etc. So every personality Rama met in the name of Vasishtha, Agastya, Gautama, or Vishwamitra, or Atri, everybody is in 10th mandala. So that way that the clarity is there. Rama Jamadagnya, that is Parashurama, also is in the 10th mandala, like that.
So coming to the point of the Chiranjeevis, which is a very ubiquitous kind of element, which is mentioned often across different stories, different traditions, essentially. So you mentioned that the Chiranjeevis was a later interpolation, and it has been kind of put into the text in a certain context. So can you please tell us a little about the Chiranjeevis?
Yeah, that is a very important confusion people have. So I will tell you the reason why the Chiranjeevi concept has emerged. So initially the Yuga system that was followed was only 5 years. So there is a lunar calendar, lunar years and solar year. So lunar year have 358 days, and solar year will be having 360 days. So both of them, there is a need of synchronization of the lunar and solar years. So in 5 years, if you add up all the lunar years, and then there is an Adhimasa of 2 months, then both the lunar and solar years will be synced. So that was the real purpose, practical purpose of the 5-year Yuga. Very clearly it is mentioned in the Mahabharata, in the Virata Parva, where a conversation between Duryodhana and Bhishma. There was a doubt in Duryodhana's mind whether the Pandavas really completed 13 years. Then Bhishma mentioned based on the Panchavarshiya Yuga, they have completed all the, even the 2 Panchavarsha Yugas, which are part of the 13 years, they have completed. All the Adhimasas they have completed. All the additional days also they completed. So there it is very clear, the Pandavas were following the Panchavarsha Yuga. So during the Rama era and the Pandava era, the Panchavarsha Yuga, it's also in the Vedanga Jyotisha, also the oldest astronomy text. So the Vedanga Jyotisha based Panchavarsha Yuga was followed by both Sri Rama and the Pandavas. Later on, this Panchavarsha Yuga also have some residues, because it's not exact. Even after adding 2 months, still residues will be there. So they were seeking larger and larger time periods. So they got interested in the Saturn-Jupiter cycles. So both Saturn and Jupiter will conjunct in any of the 12 signs. That is, any one of the 12 rashis, or any of the nakshatras, or anywhere in the sky, they will conjunct in once in 20 years. But exactly in a particular constellation like Kumbha Rashi, they will conjunct in once in 60 years. Like that, this Saturn-Jupiter cycle, like after 60, 120, 120, and then 1200, then 12,000. And then the last 12,000 years got multiplied by 360 again, when resulted into 43.2 million Chatur Yuga. That is very well known after Gupta-Era. So this entire expansion of the Yuga definition happened. Because the 20-year Yuga, they expanded into, following the Saturn-Jupiter cycle, they expanded 20 to 60 to 120 to 1200 to 12,000 to 4.32 million, for 43.2 million Chatur Yuga. So this all happened. So what happens for example, in an intermediate scenario of a 12,000 Chatur Yuga, Rama will be, and again then mapping also happened. The mapping of Sri Rama to Treta Yuga, and then mapping of Krishna to end of Dwapara Yuga. All these things happened as part of our traditional evolution. So then after all this mapping, what happened? There is a gap of 2,400 years between Rama and Sri Krishna and Pandavas. In a 12,000 year long Chatur there is a gap of 2,400 years. So how to compensate, how to accommodate for it? And of course, in for the million Chatur then it will be something like 8.64 lakh years between Rama and Krishna. So when you have huge gaps, because the yugas were keep on redefined, you got this huge gap. And very early onwards, Rama is considered as Treta Yuga's end, and Krishna is considered as at the end of Dwapara Yuga. So how to maintain? So then there was a need for Chiranjeevi concept, because all the people who were supposed to be living in the 100-year period got separated by 2,200 years or 8.64 million years. Then you need to invent something. So that invention, the traditional invention, is the Chiranjeevi concept. Because if you look at the Chiranjeevi list, almost everybody is actually people who have seen both Rama and the Pandavas. So in the Chiranjeevi list, you will see Hanuman, starting with Parashurama, Hanuman, and people wonder why Markandeya has introduced as Chiranjeevi, because in the Mahabharata he mentioned that he met Rama, not in Ramayana. So,
right.
But the people who have defined the Chiranjeevi list, they have found out that then Markandeya also Chiranjeevi, then Jambavan also Chiranjeevi, then Vibhishna is Chiranjeevi. Again, the Vaisravana is not Chiranjeevi, but he considered as a Ashtadikpala, so he is considered as living eternally, etc. So there are multiple mechanisms by which they have resolved the problem of separation of Rama and Krishna by a large amount of like thousands of years or million in lakhs of years. So that is the concept. But there is before ending, I will say there is another way of interpreting the Chiranjeevi, is that these people who were part of both Rama's and Pandava's life, they were living for a long period of time. So perhaps they lived more than 100 years. That is why they were called Chiranjeevis. So it's not infinity, but it's a large period. So because in the Rig Veda it mentioned a person, if a person lives for 100 years, it's good enough. It's a long life. So if somebody is living more than 100 years, they can be designated as Chiranjeevis, for example. So that designation will apply to Rama, Jamadagnya, Hanuman. All those people will be living more than 100 years, so that they will meet the Pandava era people.
Absolutely. That's fascinating again, because it almost seems like a scaling transformation in physics, right? Or in mathematics, where the scaling essentially needs to have some elements brought in to explain the existence or the continued existence of some of the characters within the two itihasa, essentially. And this whole idea of metrics, the whole idea of variables, characterizing kind of variables, in this case time. There is another kind of aspect with respect to distance, for instance, and you mentioned in your study of the Ramayana about the concept of the Yojanas, and the idea that there are different kinds of sides to that, particularly two, I believe, that you mentioned about in terms of the definition of what is a Yojana. And can you please tell us a little about that?
Yes. So like for example, in the rivers of Rigveda, the biggest discovery of the positioning of Sarayu, etc. And in the Mahabharata, it is more about the ages of Pandavas and Bhishma and Dronacharya, etc. But in the Ramayana, the biggest discovery is the two different kinds of Yojanas that in the Ramayana the poet has used. Then nobody has cracked this, because in the Ramayana, if you put the standard Yojana distances like 12 kilometers per is one Yojana, 12 kilometers, which is evolved in the Maurya period. In the Mauryan period, that 12 kilometer Yojana, 13 kilometer Yojana, etc. has evolved. But if you put that 12 kilometer, etc., you will get the situation that the length and the dimensions of the Ayodhya city itself, if you put 12 kilometer, etc., then it becomes almost half the size of Uttar Pradesh. And if you don't put it, you will never get anywhere like close to southern locations. So this is a dilemma that every researcher have faced. So what I have discovered is that there are two types of Yojanas in the Ramayana. One is used for measuring dimensions. So very clear dimension, that is length, breadth, and height. Wherever the length, breadth, and height of anything like city or mountain peak height or the length of a bridge, everywhere it is a one yojana which I designated as short yojana, which is 120 meters in length. 120 meters, very small.
Yeah.
And wherever there is a distance involved, like distance from one point to another, like for example, this Prayaga to Chitrakuta, there another yojana, which is a very long yojana, that is 48-kilometer yojana is used. So these are the two yojanas that is used in the Valmiki Ramayana, one for dimension, another for distance between 2 points. And once you applied every something like solving an equation, mathematical equation, every reference in the Valmiki Ramayana becomes perfectly intelligible.
Right.
We can so Ayodhya city also will by putting that like Ayodhya city 12 yojana length and 3 yojana width. That will be like 120 meters. If you put it, you will get a very correct size of a city in an ancient period like 2000 BC. The Ayodhya size of the Ayodhya city will be somewhere comparable to the Rakhigarhi city, etc. A little smaller than Rakhigarhi. But if you take the upper, there is a two city in a suburban area also. So if you add a suburban area, then it is more or less like 90% of the Rakhigarhi, something like that will come. And same yojana, which we are also used in the Mahabharata to find out the exact length and breadth of Dwarka city. So that also I am using in the Mahabharata. So that is there. And as a consequence of this two type of yojana, one is short yojana and long yojana. Short yojana used for dimensionality, long yojana using for distance between two places. I was able to like identify the exact real locations of places like Panchavadi and then Agastya Asrama, Sudishna Asrama, and Sharabanga Asrama. And all the places, Viratha, where the Atriya Asrama and where the Rama met Viratha. And she tried abducting Sita before Ravana tried abducting Sita. So that is when Viratha got killed. He took away Sita, abducting. But then that time Viratha. So that location, and then Kabandha location, which is to the south of Janasthana. And then every motion, like westward motion from Kabandha location to Kishkinda, there is a northward motion from Agastya Asrama to Panchavadi. Everything I was able to resolve. So once the yojanas are defined correctly, the entire Ramayana geography opened in front of me like a password.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and that led to many further interesting and fascinating insights. I mean, if our viewers thought that was, all of it, they are in for a lot more, essentially, because you mentioned in your book on the Ramayana that the Godavari mentioned in Aranyakand, for instance, is different from the present day Godavari River. You have identified Kishkinda with Bhimbetka, which has been kind of in the discussions in various studies, around that location, essentially, the discovery that the Ramayan's Ayodhya, and this is extremely fascinating, was flooded by the Saryu River, and therefore the whole idea of Sri Ram kind of moving into his higher self by immersing himself in the river is actually to kind of work around this occurrence which happened according to what you have written, which is that the Ramayan's Ayodhya was flooded by the Saryu River. And most importantly, the determination of Ramayan's Laṅkā, right? Laṅkā not being Sri Lanka, the current day Sri Lanka, but rather being located on the Narmadā River, possibly being the Bhagatrav port city as we know it today in terms of archaeological findings. So can you tell us a little about all of these?
Yes. So the first part I've already mentioned, the proper identification of the yojanas, like shorten and larger yojana. So once I applied that, I got the correct, like exactly like the yojana distance mentioned in between the Prayaga to Chitrakuta, and then after Chitrakuta to Atriya Asrama, Sharabanga Asrama, Sudishna Asrama, everything was falling in perfect sense and falling in place. And of course, I have used like traditional locations of Sudishna Asrama, etc. So I didn't invent any location. So Sudishna Asrama's location is whatever tradition mentions. Sharabanga Asrama, wherever tradition mentioned. Even today, Sharabanga is a place name. So that's all. And then from Sudikshna there was the Rama wanted to see all the Rishi Munis, and then Sudikshna said, okay, there is an ashrama mandala where you can go and visit all the Rishi Munis, but come back after visiting. So 10 years, this people don't believe it. 10 years of the 14-year life of Rama was spent by going through different Rishi Munis in the ashrama mandala and then coming back to Sudikshna ashrama. So then I have, based on my current insight about Yojanas, I found out it is on the particular river, Satna River. And today Satna River is known as the Tamasa, Tons River. Of course, there are two Tamasa rivers. One is Tamsa River, which is a kind of a northern tributary of Ganga, which flows little next to the south to Sarayu River. So it flows very close to Ayodhya. So Rama's travel from Ayodhya, the first stop was on that Tamasa River, and he sleep there. And then, so this particular Tamasa River is the Dandakaranya River, the main heartline of Dandakaranya. That is the Dandakaranya River, and it originates from Sudikshna Ashrama, and it ends in Ganga River, where it is a tributary of Ganga, southern tributary of Ganga, today known as the Satna River or the Tamasa River, etc., Tons, etc. So that the end where it joins Ganga is where the Valmiki Ashrama. So the Ramayana is implicitly telling that Rama has already gone through all the Rishi Muni ashramas, but somehow the Valmiki himself has omitted out that Rama has visited Valmiki ashrama. So keep it that aside. And then once Rama came back to Sudikshna ashrama after complete circuitry, completely 10 years elapsed, and he came back to Sudikshna ashrama. He said, I want to now visit Agastya ashrama, because Agastya ashrama is not part of the ashrama mandala circuit. It is southern, it is a little bit south. So then he gives a Yojana distance from Sudikshna ashrama to Agastya ashrama. And the Agastya ashrama is in traditional identified, it is in the northern side of the Vindhya mountain, where today it is called Siddhanath Mandir is located. The traditional location, it's not my location. And I looked at what is the distance from the this Sudikshna ashrama to Agastya ashrama. It's perfectly matching. There are no discrepancy of it. So whatever size of Yojana, everything is whatever I have identified is correct. So many places I have put this Yojana distance, everywhere it is correct. Then I have used the same Yojana distance where this Agastya mentioned, like to Rama. You can go to a place called Panchavadi, which is I think two Yojanas to the north of my ashrama. So very clear, distance is 2 Yojanas and direction is northwards. So this is where all the researchers ignore this, because in their mind the Panchavadi is in Nasik. 90% Panchavadi people think Nasik. 10% there is another alternative that is in the Bhadraj, near the Parnashala near Bhadrajalam in Telangana. So either people either think that it is Nasik or the Bhadrajalam, the Parnashala near Bhadrajalam in Telangana. Because of that, they just ignore this particular sloka. But I take it very seriously. So because I know the Yojana distance I have calculated. So based on that, whatever I have this mention about, Agastya has mentioned about 2 Yojana northwards, I have located Panchavadi in the middle of, amidst the this ashrama mandala, in the Satna river itself. So that time it clicked me. The Godavari that is mentioned by Agastya is Satna river itself. That is, Tamasa river is one name, another name is Godavari. So there is very reason, because if you look at the migration, the Rishi Munis were living on the Ganga river. So slowly along the Tamasa river, they migrated southwards to Dandakaranya, starting with Valmiki ashrama and the Ganga confluence. Along Satna river, they migrated from Ganga to Dandakaranya, and Sudikshna ashrama is the last ashrama in the source of Tamasa river. So that river is the lifeline of the Rishi Munis, because then they bring their cow, and the ashramas will be like without cow, the ashramas cannot survive. So this is the entire society of depicted in the Valmiki Ramayana, where Rishi Munis are living in an area inhabited by the Rakshasas. Basically, the people who are not Vedic, they are not affiliated with Vedic culture, so they will not have any Rishi Muni, etc. So they don't know they are Rishis or Munis or anything. For them, they are intruders. So this is the situation in which they came and they asked help from Rama to protect us from the Rakshasas, because otherwise our settlement will be just like that. They will overthrow. So the name Godavari came to the Tamasa river because it is the river where the Goshalas of the Rishi Munis are established. Because without Goshalas, you cannot have asrama. So that way, the river Godavari, that original Godavari name is for the Tamasa river. So that is southern Tamasa river. So I have identified, they were designations as the northern Godavari to distinguish it from the southern Godavari, which is the popular Godavari of South India. So the Godavari become very clear to me. That is the Aranyakanda Godavari is nothing but Tamasa river. And that is why they say Panchavadi is in the Godavari, banks of Godavari. So now how to test it? So in the Uttarakanda, Sita said, I want to see all the Rishi Munis that I have seen earlier during our Vanavasa. So what did Rama do? Rama didn't send her to the Godavari of South India, not into Andhra Pradesh. He just sent her to the confluence of Ganga and Tamasa river where the Valmiki Asrama is there. So there the connection becomes like your earlier connection becomes true. That is because Sita is talking about again going back to the Rishi Munis. So he sent him Sita to confluence of Tamasa and Ganga. That means earlier they were living in the same river. Otherwise, Sita would have been sent to Godavari of South India or to Nasik or Bhadrachalam. No, directly to the Ganga Tamasa confluence. So that way, my theory become like confirmed that this particular river is the Godavari river. So all the data points used in the Valmiki Ramayana, I have used to test my theories and then confirm it. So that is how. And yeah, the last about the Bharat Rao Island, because if you look at, there is a strong connection between Ravana and Narmadā, because one of the main enemy of Ravana is Kartavirarjuna, who is his kingdom was the Heheya with Mahishmati on the banks of Narmada. Another thing is the grandfathers of Ravana, that is Malivat, Mali, Sumali. All the three grandfathers married daughters of Narmada. So that is a political statement where they marry daughters of Narmada, means they are settled in the Narmada basin. And again, Malyavat mountain, that is another name for the Vindhya mountain. The northern part of the Vindhya mountain is called Malyavat mountain. That is named after Malyavat, that is Ravana's grandfather. So all these things add up to a kind of Ramayana geography to the north of Narmada river. And Narmada is very much attached to the Pulastya lineage of Ravana, because the marriages, everything is like daughters of Narmada. And Kartavirarjuna, the main enemy of Ravana, is again Narmada. Everything combined together. Now I want to test it from Mahabharata. So in the Mahabharata, again Sahadeva reached Prabhukacha, that is Baroj, that is on the Narmada, another seaport on the Narmada mouth. And this Narmada mouth is not like today's Narmada mouth. Earlier it was very wide, like a kind of mouth of a snake, opened mouth of a snake. It was very wide. It was reaching up to Prabhukacha. Today, because of siltation, that the mouth becomes smaller and smaller, like that. But earlier it was very big. So this Prabhukacha is another seaport on the banks of the mouth of Narmada, which you can see in the map of Gujarat. So Sahadeva is sending message from this particular Prabhukacha to Vibhishana in Laṅkā. That means the Laṅkā should be close by, nearby. So that is another data point from Mahabharata, where I get the Laṅkā is in the mouth of Narmada. And the last point is like starting from the Rigvedic period, the place, the ocean where the Sindhu and the Saraswati drains, like the Harappan period, etc. That is called Dakshina Samudra.
Right.
So this particular Ganga, when it is on the mouth of Narmada, that become automatically into Dakshina Samudra, because the Samudra around Gujarat is the Dakshina Samudra as far as Harappan people are concerned, as part of Indo-Gangetic people are concerned. Anybody living in the northern side, especially because our civilization has a western like bias, like the Rigvedic civilization is more western compared to eastern.
Right.
And the entire Sindhu Saraswati civilization, which anyway got extended into Narmada, and I have used a new term called Saraswati Sindhu Narmada civilization. So the Harappan, late Harappan, it expanded to Narmada and reached up to Damiabad in Maharashtra. So everything adds up, like how the early Harappan to mature Harappan to late Harappan civilization expansion, the Rigvedic civilization, and the later Ramayana adds up with Narmada as a kind of an important area. So Ramayana is just after the Rig Veda, right? So naturally, it reflects the situation which is just after the mature Harappan period, the late Harappan period, where the Harappan civilization extended to Narmada and beyond Narmada up to Daimabad. So Bhagatrav is again a seaport like similar to Baroj, Bagacha. They are dual seaport like Lothal, also very much in the same geography. All these three are seaports which were trading and very rich cities, very rich and wealthy city. That is what Ramayana mentioned. Laṅkā is a kind of a Sone ki Laṅkā and these things, because it's a very rich city, very rich and wealthy city. Ravana is a kind of a late Harappan king who are ruling, the Harappan king, or who is ruling in the Bhagatrav seaport, etc. So that is how I bring together the Harappan geography, the Vedic geography, and Ramayana geography, everything together, concluding that Laṅkā is in the Bhagatrav island, in this mouth of Narmada.
Right. I mean, and that's that totally reorients our understanding of the geography of Ramayana, of course, and the whole idea of Sri Ram going to the south of India to Sri Lanka is, of course, not quite there in this formulation, and it's more of oriented around the Narmada River itself. Now, the other point that I had mentioned about the Saryu River submerging kind of the Ayodhya, which is mentioned in the Ramayana. You mentioned about some of the textual references from the Mahabharat, or Mahabharata, just before the Mahabharata, I believe, where the presence of Ayodhya is not quite seen essentially in the texts themselves or in the references, and then it kind of comes back into the discussion, so to say. So, given the current kind of the recent occurrences with respect to Sri Ram Janmabhoomi Kshetra, and of course there is the aspect of belief, which does not quite come within the rational framework beyond a point, and should not. But regardless, just as a point of curiosity, you mentioned about this. Could you please tell us a little about the same?
Yeah. And just I will talk before talking about Ayodhya. I just clear some misconceptions. This Ramayana geography limited to the northern side, that is up to Narmada, have both plus and minus. Like, for example, now there should not be any chance for the Dravidian politics of DMK, etc., because Rama is not inverted into Tamil Nadu, and Ravana is also not a DMK or Dravida hero. And so many Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, UP lineages, they claim descent from Ravana, and that is also matching with my research. So I think my book will be the end of the Dravidian politics itself, because there is no invasion angle for Rama to Tamil Nadu, and Ravana is also not their hero. And then coming to Ramayana, yes, I mentioned towards Uttarakanda, there is a mention about a flood. Flood is actually implied, that I have implied, because there is a mention about Sarayu flowing over Ayodhya. That is clear. Sloka is mentioned in the Uttarakanda of Ramayana. And then remaining thing is like the poet, because it's a very sad situation, right? Sad event where the Sarayu is flooding over the Ayodhya city, and then that is why this is mentioned without reducing the sadness. It is mentioned as a Rama like having Jalasamadhi inside the river Sarayu, and along with Rama, all the citizens of Ayodhya did Jalasamadhi. So there is a clue, because there is no need for so many people to do Jalasamadhi. But of course, there are various other reasons are put in, but it's a given clue that the entire city got submerged, and how to test it. So one reason within Ramayana itself, because neither Leva or Kusha ruled from Ayodhya. They were transported to Leva is become a king of Sravasti, and Kusha become a king of Kushavati. So if it was not a flooding, if there was no flood in Ayodhya, and Ayodhya is still a city, then why can't Leva and Kusha rule Ayodhya? So there is again a hint, the silence of Valmiki. That means the river has overflowed over the Ayodhya and totally destroyed, because of which Rama's two sons, Leva and Kusha, rule from other cities which are little few kilometers away from Ayodhya. Now, how to test it? So I looked at the Mahabharata. So in the Mahabharata, because after Rama, then immediately Rama is contemporary to Shantanu, so nothing can be talked about Shantanu's fate. After Shantanu, who comes? Bhishma comes. So in the Bhishma's abduction of Kashi, there is a very important data point where the princesses of Kashi are called Kosala princesses. So that is again a political, because the Kashi princess, how can they be called Kosala? Because after Ayodhya got destroyed, then the only city that is related to Ayodhya is Kashi, because even in the Ramayana it is very clear Kashi is mentioned as the city of the uncle of Rama. That means Rama's mother's brother is ruling in Kashi. So they have a very, very close relation between Kashi and Ayodhya. So after Ayodhya destroyed, Kashi took over the kind of caretaker, as a caretaker, not the annexation, but as a caretaker, Kashi took over affairs of Kosala and then created Kashi Kosala kingdom. That is why in Bhishma, when the Amba, Ambika and Ambalika also called Kosala princess. And Bhishma didn't go to Ayodhya or anywhere, only she went to Kashi. And the princesses are called Kosala princesses. So that means the entire political identity of Kosala is now merged with Kashi. And later, then one more generation, then Pandu's Digvijaya. So in the Pandu Digvijaya, you don't see any mention of Ayodhya. So he is defeating a lot of eastern kingdoms. He mentioned about Kashi and then many other like Dasharna and Kunti. So many from Kunti he got his first wife Kunti. That's a kingdom name. And Kunti, Dasharna, and so many kingdoms, but there is no mention of Ayodhya. So there is been at least one generation gap, like Pandu generation completely Ayodhya is not at all built. It is still in a state of ruin. But then Pandu's son Bhima in his eastern Digvijaya, first time the Ayodhya is again mentioned. So there is a king named Dirga Prajna ruling from Ayodhya. And even Brihatbala, that is a descendant of Kusha, which I consider as grandson of Kusha, is ruling from little bit, not in from Ayodhya, but from Kosala itself. So like southern Kosala is what I consider it as. So there is two kings related to Kosala. That is, one is the Kosala king Brihatbala, descendant of Kusha. And another is a unknown king called Dirga Prajna ruling from Ayodhya. And both are defeated by Bhima. And so I considered in the book Mahabharata that this Dirga Prajna is the king who has revived, again re-established Ayodhya after a gap of some few decades, where during the active periods of Bhishma and Pandu, Ayodhya was in ruins, and just before this Digvijaya of Bhima, that city got re-established by Dirga Prajna, and the descendant of Kusha was there as Brihatbala, who was again both of them defeated by Bhima, and then later in the Kurukshetra War, Brihatbala is killed by Abhimanyu, Arjuna's son Abhimanyu. So these kind of historical connections I was able to unearth by comparing both. It's a comparative analysis of Ramayana and Mahabharata.
Very fascinating. And when we talk about the Ramayana, of course, you have given so many wonderful insights, or at least postulations or formulations of thoughts based on fairly rigorous and consistent kind of arguments, so to say. You also speak about the Mahabharata in your third book, The Geography of Mahabharata. And within that as well, you make some startling statements. So to cite some, you identify, for instance, the true location of Dwarka city as Dholavira. You have postulated that there were actually two individuals who were given the title of Bhishma, which possibly explains the longevity within the narrative of the figure of Bhishma. The discovery that Yudhishthir was born through Niyog of Vidur with Kunti, which probably explains the idea of him being a son of Dharma, because Vidur is seen as the embodiment of Dharma. Discovery that Arjun was a true son of Pandu himself, and that aligns with the idea that Indra was often spoken of in terms of the king of a certain kind of time, the preeminent king, so to say. Then the sons of Dhritarashtra, other than Duryodhan, Dushasan, Vikarn, and Chitrasen, likely being born from Dasis of Gandhar, which makes sense because in that period of time there was the prevalence of such occurrences and the legitimization of the offsprings thereof. The discovery that Śikhaṇḍī, which was very fascinating for me, because we all have heard about the story of Amba being given the wrong end or the bad side of what Bhishma did, because she had somebody she loved and then she was not allowed to marry him. Then she was taken away but not accepted there as well. So the discovery that Śikhaṇḍī, this figure of Śikhaṇḍī, who's said to be the reincarnation of, or rather the transformed version of Amba, given the grace of Sri Parshuram, or rather, sorry, of Shiva, is actually a descendant of Amba. Discovery that Panchali, Draupadi, actually didn't quite need the help of Sri Krishna, but protected her own dignity by coming to the Sabha with a single piece of cloth, which was extremely long, after being alerted by secret messengers of Yudhishthir, when the final kind of throw of the dice had happened and Yudhishthir had ended up losing Draupadi as well. And finally, Samjaya's geographical description of the whole world, with a very distinct kind of characterization of two rabbit-shaped circular islands, and two people tree-shaped islands as well, with the last bit being a circular island, sorry, with which was called Sudarshana. Right. So these are very fascinating aspects when it comes to the stories themselves and the geography that comes from it. So can you please tell us a little about them?
Yeah, yes. So the first one is about Dwarka. So many people will be surprised to know that the Dr. S.R. Rao's excavation of the Bed Dwarka, that is yielded a city, but it is made in the internet, viral internet, the WhatsApp University. They mentioned about 9,000 BC, but the excavator, Dr. S.R. Rao himself mentioned it is expected to be, he was aspiring for 1,500 BC. So not more than that. So his own admission is that the city, the remains of the city or the walls, etc., is 1,500 BC. So I was exploring because my most important date I have put for Kurukshetra War is 1793 BC. So anyway, the Dwarka city will not support me. The Bed Dwarka city is not supporting the date of 1793 BC. And then I was exploring the entire area around Gujarat, etc. So that time I discovered very fascinating the Dholavira. The Dholavira actually, unlike today, where there is a road connection, etc., the Dholavira was an island. So that struck me also. And then Dholavira, it is in the Kadirbet Island. So anybody in Gujarat knows that. So initially I was thinking about Dholavira as like Mohenjo-daro or Harappa, etc. But now I struck me that it was an island, and the entire Ran of Kutch was an ocean, kind of a sea, similar to the Kutch Gulf or Gulf of Cambet. The Ran of Kutch was another gulf, a sea basically, and in that there is an isolated island called this Kadirbet, in that there is a Harappan city called Dholavira. Now, when I looked at, because I know the Yojana distance of length and breadth of cities, I have arrived at from Ramayana. I applied the same 120-meter Yojana for the Dholavira based on Krishna's description of Dwaraka to Yudhishthira. And to my surprise, which is like shock for me, that it's exactly matched with the inner city of Dholavira. Whatever the words Krishna mentioned, inner city of if you put the dimension, it matches with the inner city of Dholavira. So the Dholavira also, the city also grew in different stages. So inner city is the oldest part. So that is matching with whatever Krishna mentioned as the dimension of, in terms of Yojana, the dimension of Dwaraka city. That was the biggest kind of insight. And then in the Harivamsha and in Mahabharata, the Dwaraka island is indicated as very close to Saraswati. It's not very far away like Bed Dwaraka or anything. So that is also very much matching with the Kadirbet island where Dholavira is. It is very close to Saraswati, that is where the mouth of Saraswati, where it drains into the Ran of Kutch. And the entire Ran of Kutch was a very pleasant sea where the boats were coming, and that is why the Dholavira became a very rich city, because the boats were coming and going, and with like trade goods from far away area like Mesopotamia, etc. This is why the prosperity of Dwaraka. And if you look at in the Mahabharata, the Krishna is the biggest beneficiary of the Pandavas by giving them wealth, etc. That wealth is coming from the Dwaraka. So that everything matches up with the Dholavira. And another surprise was Dholavira is submerged 2 times. That Kadirbet island or Dholavira city was abandoned 2 times. A double abandonment of Dholavira city is matching perfectly well with the timelines of Sri Krishna and Pandavas based on 1793 BC date. It was abandoned once, and that is around 1900 BC. It was abandoned and it reappeared, and that is around 1850. It reappeared, 1850 BC, and then it is in that reappeared Kushasthali island, which is earlier inhabited and now barren. That is where the Krishna established Dwarka. And then after Krishna's lifetime, after 36 years after the Kurukshetra War, it again submerged. And that submergence, like if it is 1793 is the date of Kurukshetra War, add 36, it will be somewhere around 1750 BC. Exactly the same time Dholavira also submerged or abandoned. So the Dholavira has all the signatures of being a Dwarka, that is Dwarka city mentioned in the Mahabharata. That is one thing, one point. And
with Amba's story as well, with Śikhaṇḍī, yeah, you mentioned.
Yeah, Śikhaṇḍī. Yeah, yes. So I was looking at the various because I have an Excel sheet for creating this book of geography of Mahabharata. I was putting the different the estimated age of every individual. Then I got that the Amba's like granddaughter. Like if you Amba has a daughter and Amba's daughter. Amba's granddaughter will be of the similar age of Panchali. So that is how it struck me. And then I looked at it because there were different individuals. Like for example, Dronacharya was associated with Panchala. He was a friend of Drupada, but because of bad treatment for Dronacharya, he switched sides and become like affiliated with the Kurus. So Amba has a similar situation where she was actually trying to be marrying Bhishma and others, but Bhishma actually discarded her. So her natural reaction will be to going to the competitor country. So Panchala and Kuru were having a conflict, starting with, I mean, earlier days also, like Sudas and Samvarana in the Rigveda Dasarajana battle. So that ancestral conflict continued. So there is a soft conflict between Panchala and Kuru during the Pandava era as well. So when Kurus abandoned Amba, where would she go? She will go to Panchala. So he went there, and remaining thing is not mentioned in the Mahabharata, but natural, like Dronacharya associated with the Kurus, then reverse of that, like Amba associated with Panchala, and then probably Amba's daughter married Drupada, and they got a child, daughter, that is a granddaughter of Amba, that is Śikhaṇḍī. So there is, without any kind of magical narratives, we get a straight away the Śikhaṇḍī is a granddaughter of Amba, like that. And the age of Śikhaṇḍī, because I calculated the age of all the people, all the Pandavas, Panchali and everybody, was coming around 19 years, and Panchali's age was coming around 17 years during the Panchali Swayamvara, 17 or 18 years, like that. So they were all almost similar age. And Śikhaṇḍī is elder to Panchali and Dumya. That is also directly mentioned in Mahabharata. Everything is coming clear. Yeah, and then
So I mean, it is more poetic in the sense that if you were to look at the story of Śikhaṇḍī and Amba, poetic or even kind of mythological is a wrong word, but we cannot have the same kind of timelines or the idea of time essentially when it comes to thinking about them, for instance, within that composition. So you mentioned about the aligning of the ages essentially, right? Is there any other kind of reason why you would go with that track essentially, rather than just taking the simple track of the poetic continuity of Amba as Śikhaṇḍī itself?
Yes. So directly, anyway, the poet also mentioned that this Śikhaṇḍī is a reincarnation of Amba. So there itself, that connection is already established. So the reincarnation part I have re-rendered as the relationship, like granddaughter relationship. And again, Śikhaṇḍī is a part of Panchala. That is also very clear. So you can make these natural connections that she got asylum in Panchala, like Drona got asylum in Kuru. So I compare between Drona and Amba. One is from Panchala to Kuru, another from Kuru to Panchala. So that's how it is. Mirror image, mirror reflection kind of thing.
Yeah, and the Mahabharata, of course, the central kind of event which led to the entire war, to everything which happened thereafter, was the game of dice, right? And I mentioned while introducing this point of discussion that you mentioned that Sri Krishna's intervention was not quite required because Panchali herself prepared for that particular kind of eventuality. So can you please tell us a little about that?
Yeah, yes. So one of the thing is even the critical edition is also of a great help here, because the kind of divine intervention of Krishna is considered as a later edition, and the critical edition doesn't carry that. So only in regional version the divine help of Krishna is mentioned, but in the critical edition there is no mention of Krishna helping Panchali. And Krishna's own admission that in the Vanaparva Krishna comes, and after the Pandavas left Hastinapura, they reached this Kamyaka Vana, and Krishna visited them. Then he said, I could not help you. Directly Krishna is telling, I could not help you because I was busy with a battle with Salva. So Salva attacked Dwarka and he was busy in the battle. And he straight away tells, I could not help you in your time of need. If I was not part of the Salva battle, I would have come. The moment you were invited for Dyuta, I would have come there and I would have helped you. So that is Krishna's own admission is direct. Now comes to the Yudhya episode. In that, if you closely examine that period, there is one isolate event that is mentioned in the entire critical edition, where without any explanation, where it mentions that Yudhishthira is observing all the kind of evil words Duryodhana and Karna and Shagni, everybody is mentioning. So he sensed the mood of the Sabha. And that time, when he lost everybody, like including like all the 5 brothers and Pandavas, and he stayed with Draupadi, some kind of sense came in his mind. There is an isolated incident where he calls a messenger and asking him to go and inform Panchali. Now, it's what is the result of it? Nothing is mentioned in the critical edition. So I consider that this particular kind of incident, which is very isolated, is the real clue for how the Panchali escaped herself. Because Panchali was having at that time she was having the periods, and she was having a single cloth. So when we think about the single cloth, now what we normally comes into mind is something like which is wrapped around the thighs, etc. But I consider that single cloth is actually a terminology that you use for sari as well. Sari and a very long kind of dress, because there is only one cloth, right? Sari is very big dress. Like it can run for some 10 meters, 15 meters, whatever meters, but it's a single cloth. Right. So that is what Panchali has used. So she may be wrapping around herself with maybe tens or hundreds of wraps around herself, on her thighs and on her shoulder, everything like you will put sari. So and come to Sabha. And then she is admitting like I'm only having single cloth, etc. But actually we have to imagine the cloth that which is a very big, very long kind of wrapped single cloth kind of cloth. So that is even because in the later literature, sari also called ekavastra. Sari is called ekavastra because it is a single piece of cloth. Yes. So that is what I considered as the protected Panchali. And of course, she is also called Krishna. Like Sri Krishna is called Krishna with a short vowel, and Krishna is the name of Panchali. So Krishna saved herself. That is, Panchali saved herself. Actually.
Right. Very interesting. Now, speaking of Krishna and the Yaduvanshi, the Yadavs, essentially, the final kind of battle after Kurukshetra, right, which kind of led to the entire decimation, the entire destruction of the lineage altogether, you make a very interesting observation about the Iron Age aspect of it, essentially, right? And a certain kind of marked difference from what came before. And that was a very climactic kind of battle of sorts and an internecine conflict within the kind of clan, so to say, right? So can you please tell us a little about that?
So yes, one of the major reasons I date Kurukshetra War and the major events in the Mahabharata later to 2000 BC is because of the iron. And iron is mentioned throughout in the Mahabharata, like Maharaja, that is iron weapon, etc. But in the Musala Parva, the poet has more interest on the iron, saying that there was the rishis came to visit Krishna. Then Krishna's son Samba insulted them, saying by addressing them himself as a pregnant woman, and asked when will whether I will get a son or a daughter. Then the Muni said like you will give birth to a Musala, iron Musala. So that is where the iron very much important comes. So again, it's a poetical thing. So I explored because when I looked at the actual event, an actual battle that happened, there I see that it has a kind of dispute continuity from Kurukshetra War, where Kritavarma supported the Kauravas and Satyaki supported Pandavas. So two generals from the Yadavas, they fought each other. And the dispute continued, and then they are fighting each other using the kind of blade of grass, which is coming out of the iron, the musala, that is the iron musala is powdered and put it into the water, and from the water the grass grow, and then it is a blade of grass, and it is very like a sword. So
Right.
here I consider that it's all poetic way of telling things. So I consider like filtering through the poetry, I consider that they have invented some new methods of creating swords made of iron, steel. So because these swords made of iron become India become popular for that. Different parts of the countries came to India to get the sword, the iron sword. So this is a sword which is cannot rust because it's the carbureted, and so it is a kind of maybe Mahabharata already talking about Iron Age, iron weapons, etc. Maybe 36 years after the Kurukshetra War, there was more innovation in the iron, so that they created steel. The
Right.
steel won't rust, and steel is more powerful than iron. And the steel involves mixing carbon in correct proportion to the iron, and then alloying this the carbon with and iron with steel. Sorry, alloying the iron with carbon compounds, and you get steel. And steel blades, blade itself, steel blade is or steel swords are the most powerful swords of the ancient era. And the entire India, like especially from Gujarat onwards to South India, was famous for this sword. And even Damascus sword, everything basically sourced from India.
Right.
So this is how I connected with the again another advancement of the iron technology. That is what again, of course, this resulted into destruction. That is another matter. This sword, the iron, so the steel sword, they are used. They killed each other within short period of time.
Yes.
I mean, in few hours they killed each other.
Right. Well, this has been extremely fascinating, but the most important question when it comes to the whole study of geochronology and ascertaining the historicity of the texts of the Ved, of the Itihasa, is the civilizational significance of it, of course, and the modern day kind of importance that it has. Because we have seen time and again that there has been a certain appropriation of the narrative, so to say, or a misprojection of what various kind of aspects of our culture, of our civilization actually mean. By, let's say, Indologists back in the British Raj era. And even today, we see many people who do not quite want to go along the lines of accepting many of these aspects and facets of our culture and civilization. So how do you see the study of geochronology playing a role as we move towards hopefully transforming Bharat to becoming a Vishwaguru in the days ahead? And how would ascertaining the historicity and geographical certainty over our civilizational foundations add to the import of the Ved and the Itihas in the modern age?
Yes, it's a very important question. So starting from the first book, Rivers of Rigveda, actually I am creating a narrative or the right geochronological like the history of India, because the Rigvedic period is very much important for the entire in Eurasia, I would say, if not for Africa or any other continent, but Eurasia it is very important because my book, along with the books of Kalagiri, very clearly shows that the Indo-European language was originating in the this northwest India between Saraswati and the Sindhu region, and it has migrated not only to the northwest like this into Iraq, Afghanistan and Iran, but also to the north to Central Asia, and from there onwards the standard model of IE dispersal that will leading to the dispersal of Indo-European language to Europe, which they also agree. I mean, Europeans have no problem in agreeing that the language, Indo-European language, came from outside Europe into Europe and displaced all the local regional languages in Europe. That they agree. So only matter is like where the connection, like they also automatically think that the same language came from Central Asia to India, which we deny. So that denial and with the full valid reasons is mentioned in Talagiri's 3-4 books and my 3 books. So that is one narrative setting for the India as a Vishwaguru, because the language itself originated, Proto-Indo-European language itself originated in India. It's an Indian language, Proto-Indo-European. So that way, once you establish that, our status as a Vishwaguru is at a higher level. And then, yes, after these 3 books, I am also writing a book on the Puranas. When I say Puranas, basically what I am looking for is all the events that happened after Kurukshetra War. So it continues with the Brihadrada dynasty, where the founder Brihadrada is in the 10th mandala of Rigveda, contemporary to Rama and Shantanu. Onwards, after Brihadrada, there is the Pratyodas, then Haryanka, Shishunaka, and then after that the Nandas, Mauryas, then Shadavahana, after Mauryas, Sungas, then Kandavas, and then finally Shadavahanas and Guptas. And by the time of Guptas, like our science, that I would like to say is there are the Gupta period science is almost equivalent to the Renaissance period science of science and technology of Europe. So 4th and 5th century Gupta period was 1000 years ahead of the 14th and 17th century Europe, where all the innovation and then new spark of innovation, everything take place. Because of unfortunate events like Islamic invasion and the European colonization, we lost that 1000 years. And in that 1000 years, until the Gupta period, towards late Gupta period up to like 12th century, you have the great, the Aryabhatta is in 4th century, then you have Bhaskara in the 12th century. So till that time, we were in the peak. And if there was no Islamic invasion or European colonization, instead of Europe, our India would have been the champions of science and technology and mathematics. So that 1000 years of slavery is what actually made us little bit means away from the race. It's like it's like a race, like an Olympic running race in which you just fell down. Just before the finishing point, you fell down. So that after the golden age of the Gupta-Era golden age of mathematics, science and technology, you got that gap. The two major invasion, Islamic invasion and the European invasion. So once you so in my upcoming book, I am studying that part also, the kind of mathematics, including calculus and linear algebra, and then analytic geometry, normal geometry, calculus up to the infinite series. Everything was actually in India. And during this period of Islamic invasion, anyway, the Islamic scholars have translated our text, Leelavati and other text, mathematical text, and then algebra, everything. They made it like algebra. The name itself, algebra, became Arabic because of that. But actually, the Indian mathematics, the right word for that is Indian mathematics. That become algebra, and then become Islamic kind of impression is created, and then they have transmitted it to Europe. So the first knowledge from India is stolen from India through Arabs into Europe, and then the Europeans themselves squandered us. So directly they absorbed everything. So that 1000 years, what they did is up to Gupta year, we were 1000 years ahead of the European. In this 1000 years, we become little bit backwards. So I'm putting all these things in my upcoming book, and again, that will be continuing as a kind of my own contribution for the Vishwaguru status of India. So, of course, India is still a Vishwaguru because the kind of Vedanta, Veda Siddhanta, there is no parallel in West. There are 3 religions, but there is nothing equivalent of Vedanta in the Western side. So we are actually a Vishwaguru, but actually we were also gurus in science and technology and mathematics, which we want to recover back.
Absolutely. I think that is a very important point because I personally am very interested in that interface, so to say. And having worked on the quantum side of things and aspects of quantum logic, for instance, and how that relates to non-binary thinking, essentially, within various kinds of Upanishadic strands of thought, I think is a very fascinating subject in itself. Now, you mentioned very importantly that the intellectual capital is what defines things in today's age. And if we were to go towards, maintaining a certain kind of cultural influence across the world, of course, that is primary. What fascinates me most in your work is that you have not relied on the crutches of necessarily any other field of study, for instance, archaeology, or beyond a point. Of course, you have, I mean, in terms of astronomy as well. But there is a certain kind of self-consistency of points that you have tried to establish within the text and across the text, right? And with certain other secondary and tertiary sources as well. And so made a comprehensive or a cohesive kind of unit, so to say, right? So that's a very interesting way to kind of go about with it. And it has been, of course, done in other contexts, but in this particular context, it is of extreme civilizational value. And I really commend you and congratulate you for having done so. And I look forward to reading your further, works. So thank you, Jijith, so much for joining us today. It has been a fairly comprehensive and long discussion, but we have covered so many interesting and fascinating aspects. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Namaste.